Hello, and welcome. You're listening to Light Sprinkles. I'm Spring Ulrich, your host, and I am here to bring inspiration, healing tips, and tools that allow you to spring forward in your life powerfully, sprinkling that light and love upon your journey with the intention of making that journey a little bit lighter. So thank you for joining me today. Thank you for listening in. And today I am wanting to dive deep and go right into my extraordinary love, life, and loss. And in sharing my story in my rawness and my realness, perhaps it will allow you to find pieces of your own story and to feel really heard and seen and less alone. Because I know for myself that that aimless wandering place and that grief land felt very much an alone space and an alone time that I didn't feel like a lot of people could understand or really feel or embrace that hadn't gone through it. And I just didn't feel that there were very many people who understood what I was going through on the level that I was going through. So I wanted just to get some information to you in some parts of my story that may bring you some perspective and allow you to feel seen and heard through that connection of my story. And I'd like to start with I started a blog when my late husband actually was going through his melanoma and had been diagnosed, and we were going through so many questions, and I had so many people asking me what was going on from day to day, and I just didn't have the energy to continue repeating the story over and over and over again. So I started a blog so I could start sending everyone to that blog and they could keep up with me through the blog and know what was happening. And of course my husband passed, and then I continued to blog after that for a while about my journey. And so I went back and looked at some of the things that I had written on my blog to just share what I was still going through. And I went back tonight and I read a poem that I wrote, and it's I'd like to read it to you. It's called the 2 a.m. poem rant. And this is where I was at and what I was experiencing, and I will read it to you here. And it starts with, "Am I doing okay? Am I doing fine? Wait, let me check the time. Am I doing, getting things done? Is this my life? What has happened to my hun? Breathe. Remember to breathe. A whirlwind rushes as I felt it for a moment. Suddenly, I am swept up and away into the next wave moments. So I ride it, this wave, with its ups and downs. I can barely keep up. Sometimes I fear I may drown. The ring, bling. How did I get myself into this thing? Is it worth my sweat, my time, my precious time? Is it? I ask while I look for my mind, my heart, and my freedom. Time for me just to be in this life. I just want to be. To take time to breathe. To listen to the soft sound of my son as he says, Mom, wanting my attention, to play and be free, to feel the sand beneath my feet. Desires to feel again his hug, his skin, and his kiss upon my chin. Every little detail comes rushing in, remembering the sweet sound of his voice, the taste of his skin, the way he stood with his hand placed just so, tapping the floss as he handed it to me, the sound of his feet as he walks in the room, the way he sweeps me off my feet and handles a broom, yummy treats and things to eat, a delicious feast whipped up in a jiffy. And no, he wasn't nifty. I'd mind not to lose 1,000 lids and clean up 1,000 more messes, just to have him alive and well again. I'd give just about anything, every diamond ring, just to hear him sing. I searched as a small child for the world's greatest dad, bought a brooch to give to this man, kept it for many years. Yes, I found this man, and yes, I did give it to him. When our son was born, he didn't live long enough for our small boy to say these 4 words to him and smile with joy. Sad but true. Now what will I do? Will this blue bird of happiness come visit you? I dream of him often, this I do, and it's not quite the same, yet it will have to do. Dreamland is calling, so off I go, with my little lad at the nipple. We are off, hoping to greet him. As my head meets the pillow, my heart calls to him once more, as I give thanks for another day, that I was graced to watch my son play. And that poem, as I read it, reminded me of things that I had forgotten about my late husband or hadn't thought about in so long, that I'm really grateful that I wrote those things down. I wrote some things down about the little things that I loved about him and the little tiny things that made up who he was and how he was with me and how we were together. I read on my blog about an experience where I had gone to a talk, and there was this woman speaking about intentional manifestations and creating your manifestations. And of course, I'm sitting there and freshly widowed, and I'm questioning all of my beliefs and all of my foundations. And I hesitated raising my hand and asking the question, but I did. I raised my hand and I was brave enough to ask, okay, so how does one get past the experience of not getting what they want, such as in the event of I didn't get the manifestation I wanted with my husband passing? And she asked me a question. She said, so what was it that you really wanted? And I said, to live out my days with him. And she replied back to me. She said, are you not? And that stopped me in my tracks, because as I thought about it and as I was living and going through my days and going through my life and experiencing my life without him, I realized that I really truly was still living out my days with him in such a different way, in a more spiritual way, and in a connected way that was beyond body, that it was beyond the limitations of the physical. But that yes, he was absolutely and truly still with me and always will be a part of me in my heart and will always be in my life through all of my days. So that brought me a little bit of peace, that he'll always be with me, and I'll still have that peace of him with me in a very different way than a physical way, but in a way that I still have him. He's a part of me. He's a part of my experience. He's a part of an energetic and spiritual connection that absolutely transcends time and space. So that brought me a sense of relief and a sense of peace and a deep knowing that even though my soul knew it, hearing someone else reflect that back to me and question that back with that question of, am I not getting that? And I also, in my blog, as I reread it, said, and I wanted that to be in the body, not just in a spiritual essence, but to be here with him. Which leads me to the part where someone had said to me, well, and sometimes having that relationship with someone in a spiritual sense and in a different way can be such a different experience than having a relationship with someone where you have all those different experiences, such as picking up their socks and having all of those minor irritations and things that come up. And I would take those, even though I understood what they were saying. It's those little things. And if you get one thing out of this entire podcast and YouTube today, it is that one thing that my now husband and I absolutely. We'll pair it back to each other and repeat often. It's those things that drive us crazy about each other. Those are the things that I get to love extra special about him. And those are the things, let me tell you, if you haven't lost someone, those are the things that you miss dearly, that you would go back and experience 1,000 times. Those irritations, those frustrations, those moments where you just get baffled at the why do they behave like this? How come they are doing this? It is in those moments that when they're gone, you truly, truly miss those moments, and that you realized were the extra specials. That's what made them who they were. And I didn't realize until my late husband was gone how much I loved those things about him, as much as I loved all of the other greatness about him, but that I really, excuse me, take a drink. That I really, truly loved everything about him. I loved how much he loved me. I loved who we were together. And I loved how extraordinary our love was and how extraordinary he made me feel. My sweet mom, one day when I was at her house after my late husband passed during the first year, she had said to me, as comforting as she possibly could, she said, "You'll be fine. You just will." And I just recognized in that moment that I don't want to be just fine, that I want to be extraordinary. And that's how he made me feel. He made me feel extraordinary. And being with my late husband was an extraordinary experience and an extraordinary love. So to be in a position where my extraordinary partner and person was no longer physically there was, wow, absolutely one of the most challenging times. And you can hear in my voice that I am being really raw and real, because clearly it still is. When I go back and I look at all of it and in the depth of it, it's still there. And it's not as bitter of a sadness and tears. I think for me today that the emotions that are coming up and flowing are from recognizing again, because it's been so long since I've read these moments and that I've gone back and revisited them, that it's a deep sweetness of how much I was loved by him and how much he loves me and how much I love him, and that I still do and that I always will. And my late husband, Terrell, he used to always say to me that everything is perfect just as it is. In fact, he surprised me one day because I had created a vision for my life, and then I recorded my voice and I would listen to it daily. And he surprised me one day by recording his own voice and doing this amazing message for me that he recorded of just how much he loved me, and how it was just a rave about me, and how proud he was and how excited he was to be with me and how excited he was about our life. And it was just this really beautiful few minutes of him just being in deep gratitude and super sweet and loving and building me up. And one of the things that he shared on that was that everything is perfect just as it is. That everything is perfect just as it is. And that brought me comfort so often because I would play that over and over and over again in his voice. And I am so blessed that I still have that recording and his voice. And that was one of the things that really carried me through a lot, because I would listen to that over and over again, and I would have his voice, and I could listen to him whenever I needed to hear his voice again. Another thing that I'll share with you is some of the really difficult stuff that maybe some people don't really share, or I have never heard somebody get real about some of these things. And one of the things that for me, after my late husband passed, I had a hard time washing my sheets because I'm very olfactory sensitive and I love smells, and I could smell him on the sheets, and I didn't want to wash away his essence from my sheets. And it took me the longest time to actually do that task, to just wash my sheets, because I didn't want to wash away his essence and his scent, because it was comforting to me to have that amazing and deep and wonderful experience of his scent. It just brought such a comfort to me to have it there. And I couldn't wash the sheets for a while. I didn't want to. It took quite a while. I don't remember how long it took me before I actually washed the sheets after his passing. I did eventually. Because being someone who likes things to be clean, I'm sure it didn't take too long before my son, who co-slept with me quite often, assisted me in making the sheets even dirtier than they normally would have been getting. So I'm sure it didn't take too long, but I remember it was a very difficult task to wash the sheets. And my son and I and my late husband, we used to have a tradition. We had found this beautiful little walnut at a Halloween celebration where someone had taken half walnuts, and they had filled them with wax and put a little candle in them. And so we had them we had it in our bathroom, and after we'd brush our teeth, we would light the candle, and then we would make a wish, all of us together. It was a sweet little tradition that we were doing with a candle. And after my late husband passed, before he passed, so with this sweet tradition of making a wish every night, when my late husband was diagnosed with stage 4 melanoma, we would make a wish, and we would wish out loud, because I believe in wishes that are expressed and shared, and I feel like that amplifies the wishes. So we would share our wishes, and I would share my wish of Daddy healing. So when we'd make our wish, we would all blow it out, to get the candle out together, and I would wish for my husband's healing. And after my husband passed and we didn't get that healing, my son still wanted to do the wishes, and so we would make a wish, and he insisted on wishing for Dad. And at the time he was 2 and he didn't have an extensive vocabulary, but he would wish on Dad every time. And it was just such a sweet and tender moment, and such a sweet thing that he needed and wanted to do. And so it wasn't just me going through grief, it was also my son. And we did it together. And I went back and I reread some of my blog, and I remembered how much of that he was in too, that he experienced grief, and that he would cry, and that he was really actually supportive. He was just this beautiful young boy who was full of love and laughter and super wise soul in of himself. And I felt like he just supported me so much during that time, and we supported each other. I would hold him, and we would cry together. There were times when I went back and I reread one of my blogs where we were sitting together, and we had been going through videos and watching videos of Daddy, and And I recognized that I wasn't actually crying. I was in a moment where I was really doing okay, and I was watching these videos and really enjoying them and being with him. And in that moment, the energy shifted for him. And I could tell he was sad, and I said, it's okay to cry, because I felt like this little boy who was so young yet and so sensitive had this need to feel like he needed to be strong for me. And I whispered to him that it's okay to cry. And then he did. I held him while he cried. And everyone grieves in their own way. Everyone goes through grief in their own way, in their own experience. And I just wanted to share with you that part of being a parent to someone who is also grieving. That dynamic amplifies it even more, because there's that sense and that feeling that I'm grieving for myself, but I'm also grieving for him and his loss, and the loss of my husband, who doesn't get to witness his son growing and going off to kindergarten, or writing his name, or telling his daddy how much he loves him, or that he's the best daddy in the world. To hear his son come home and talk about a new friend, or to learn how to drive, or get married, or be in a relationship with someone, whatever all of those milestones, every little growing out of a new pair of shoes or a new birthday. It's taken some time to really do birthdays without such that sadness. And there's always that little bit of, here's another birthday, here's another date that he's not part of. And it's not as tender, and it's not as painful as it used to be. But there still is that missing him, and that knowing that he didn't get to be there in person. And even though I know deep down that he's there in spirit, and he's watching, and he gets to experience it through a different dimension and a different way, it's not the same as being there in person. And it's such a gift to be able to experience it and live it and feel it. And I just encourage you to truly remember and love on the people that you have, and love extra special all of the things that they irritate you with, or that you are irritated by your loved ones and your sweetie pies. That it's those little things that are truly the ones that you think of and that you miss so dearly and severely. And that my husband and I both really understand, my now husband that was widowed as well, that he and I both get so deeply and profoundly, that when we got together, we were really excited to find out all those little things, those intricacies that we have about ourselves that drive our partner crazy, that we get to love extra special. So I ask you, what little extra special thing do you love about the people that you love? About your kids, about your parents, about your spouse or your partner? What are those things about them that drive you crazy and bananas and cuckoo? You constantly complain about. What are those things that you get to just love extra special about them? And see if that deepens your relationship and brings some softness and some sweetness and some graciousness, some forgiveness to the situation, to be able to love it now. Don't wait until they're no longer there to love it extra special. Start loving it now. Because I tell you that those are the things, those extra special things, that I really miss. So take that today. And even take it with yourself. What things drive you crazy about yourself that you can perhaps love a little bit more today? about yourself? How can you love yourself more? How can you love everyone else around you more, even in the things that drive you crazy? What do you get to love extra special? Take that with you. And if you can, learn to love it now. I can guarantee that it will be easier, it will be sweeter, and you won't regret it. You won't regret loving the things that drive you crazy about the person extra special. While you're at it, loving extra special, the things that drive you crazy about someone, remember to grab all of those things and just relish in the things that you really truly love about the person that are super awesome and amazing about them. Because those are things that you miss as well. Obviously, the things that you love. The things I think are surprising are the things that drove you crazy and that you felt like you could do without are the things that you really do miss. And I encourage you to really look at the things that you love about the person and really just cherish those tender and sweet things. One of the sweet and tender things that my late husband Daryl used to always say to me was, "It's all about you, love. It's all about you." He would respond to me with that statement in such a sweet and kind and generous way, in such a way that made me feel so celebrated and seen and heard and absolutely put on a pedestal and just loved so deeply and profoundly and fully, no matter what I did. If I would ask him a question about where to eat or what he wanted to do or anything, and it would just always be a response of, "It's all about you, love. It's all about you." And he was just in such service about just showing up and being in relationship with me and loving me so deeply and profoundly and fully that it was all about me. It was such a sweet thing that he would say. He had so many amazing things about him. So I encourage you to write a little joy journal down about the person or the people that you love and the things that are extra special about your children, about the people you love, the things that they say, the things that they do, so that you can go back and recall them. Because when we have our little ones, we think those little things that they say that we're going to remember them 10 years down the road because, oh, this is so adorable, I will never forget this. And it's not always that simple to remember it, even if you loved it so much. That it can be really great to go back and read these things that you love about that person, or to be able to give it to them as a gift later, sometime down the road, to be able to say, "These are the things I love about you." Or imagine if you ended up departing from this earth, and in your bodily experience, to have someone find something that you had written about them, a surprise little thing about how much you love them, and all the little things that drive you crazy that you love as well, and all the things that you love about them that are super amazing and that are so cherished and make them adorable to you. Imagine if you received that as a gift from someone that you loved. How much that would mean to you, how much that would absolutely be such a treasure. I remember hunting through all sorts of things in my house for anything, any little piece of paper that my husband had written, anything that he had touched, or that would be a surprise that I could get another piece of him. Like that I was just looking for more and more that I didn't even know he might have left behind. Everything that he had written on, anything that he had done or touched or created became even more sentimental and valuable and important. I remember there was oftentimes I had a beautiful armoire in our bedroom that had his clothing, because my clothing had taken so much space in our small closet that we had a piece of furniture in our room where he had his actual clothing. And I would walk by that armoire and I would open it up and just take a whiff of his scent and his smell. And then I would just collapse into the clothing and just give in to hugging his clothes and just allowing that scent and his clothes to just surround me and hug me. And there were times in doing that that I would actually feel him present, and not just in his actual clothing or the smell, but actually physically, in a spiritual way, present. And there were times when I would get into his vehicle, into his truck, and I would be wafted with the smell of him. Or I would find a hat or a glove that was his, and I would just breathe in his scent. Because it was any little thing that I could do to have a piece of him home again. To have a piece of him with me. And that scent of your person, the way that people smell, it's irreplaceable. No one else has the same signature smell or scent. And if I just would breathe him in, it would just flood back all the amazing memories, all of just everything. And just, it was just wonderful to have that scent. And I also had an item in the shower that my husband used, and it was a scrubby for his hair, and he would scrub his hair all down to the scalp every morning and just really get in there and scrub with his scalp. And I left that scrubby in the shower, and I would take that scrubby and just smell the scrubby because it had his scent on it. Anything that I could have or get my hands on that had his scent was comforting and brought me this sense of him still being around and his essence still surrounding me. And it was very comforting. And I don't know if you've lost someone like that, if that's something that you've experienced, but if you have, then you understand what I'm talking about and how deeply attached and primal the smell and the olfactory system is, and how it just brings so much emotion and so much comfort to be able to smell the scent of your lover, your partner, your loved one. I remember the smell of my grandma's home, and I remember the smell of my mom's home. And so smells can be so amazing and important. And I was really grateful after my late husband passed that I was using detergent, laundry detergent that was environmentally friendly and good for the environment, because it was a lot lighter on the scent and it didn't have as many perfumes in them. And so it didn't wash out 100% of the smells. Because what I have found in my experience with detergents is that a lot of the other detergents, it's not that they just necessarily clean better, but they have a lot more perfumes to cover up the smells of the clothing. Excuse me. And so I was really, truly grateful after my late husband passed that I used such an environmentally friendly, it sounds like such a silly thing to be grateful for, but I was so, so deeply grateful that I used an environmentally friendly, light scented detergent so that I could actually smell my husband on the clothing that was clean in the closet, that I could still smell his scent through the clean clothes. And that was really important to me, that I still had that and that I could still be supported by that smell. The last thing that I'd like to share with you in our time today is to encourage you, if you are going through grief, if you're going through the death of a loved one, to begin a journal at whatever stage you're at, if you feel called to write down the memories that you have, write down the things that you remember about your person or what you're going through, and the gifts that you're seeing, the gifts that you're feeling during this time and during your experience, and be able to really express and get that onto paper. Because what we know is during the first year, and actually the first 2 years of grief, when you're still going through shock and you're going through just getting your mind wrapped around this tragedy that has happened in your life and trying to recalibrate your life, that there is a thing called grief brain, and not all memories are stored as easily and readily as they typically would have in normal circumstances. So you might not remember or recall as much. And it's really wonderful to be able to go back and reread things that you may have forgotten after many years of your loved one passing. And just like I said with your kids, that you think you're going to remember the cutest little thing that they said, and then you think on it years later, and what was that thing, or does it even come up in the memory? Because our brains, in order to be a great functioning brain, there is the natural culling, and the natural part of a brain is part of letting go and forgetting information that's no longer used every day and no longer accessed constantly. So having a written document or some type of a recording for yourself on things that you want to remember and go back and recall about that person that you love can be a really healing tool and experience to be able to go back and remember some really wonderful experiences about the person that you love that has passed. So I would recommend that you take on that journaling exercise if it feels good to you. And while I'm here, I'm remembering a counselor. While I was doing some counseling after my late husband passed, she had told me, she said, Spring, no one tells you, no one wants to tell you after you lose someone that you love that, yeah, it's pretty much going to suck for the next 2 years. It's just going to be hell. You're just going to go, it's going to just really suck and be hell for the next 2 years, because the first year you're in shock and you're just trying to get used to the idea of this situation. You're just getting over the shock in the first year. You're coming up on dates. You're going through all of the entire first year without that person that you've loved in your life. You're coming up on anniversaries and dates and birthdays and every holiday and every season. You're going through this first year in shock of that person not being there, and just settling into and recognizing and realizing that they aren't coming back, and how shocking that is. And then the second year is wrapping your mind around that they really are gone, and recalibrating how you're going to function in that. So the first year, and then the second year, it really is a 2-year experience. Is from what my counselor had said, that nobody wants to tell you this, that wow, it's going to be 2 years before you're able to really feel like you can function normally again. And I think it's a fallacy to say normally again, because there is no normal after a death. There's no, I'm going to get back to normal. There is no normal. It's just a new experience, a new life, or a feeling that you're able to start functioning again. So it takes 2 years after the death of someone that you love, 2 years to begin to feel like you can function again. So give yourself grace, give yourself a pass, and know that it is deep work. It is difficult work to go through that first and that second year, and that you can do it, and that there are gifts, and there will be moments that are wonderful in that. It's like beautiful chaos. It's just a beautiful chaos. So look for the gifts, even if it's the bittersweet ones, and really, truly love those little things extra special. So I encourage you to look for the gifts in the bittersweetnesses, and in those things that drive you extra silly crazy, that those are sweetnesses, and to figure out those things that you get to love extra special. And if you already know, because you're in the experience of a loss and you've lost someone, to just enjoy those things that you love extra special about them, and look for the gifts. Keep looking for the gifts, and keep searching for what you're grateful for in the moment. And keep breathing. Keep breathing. I know it feels so chaotic in the aimless wandering, and what I know is that you can do it. What I know is that You'll get through this. Just one little step at a time, one stone at a time. And I hope that this has served you in some small way, that you found some nugget in it, some recognition of your own journey, or some acknowledgement and some connection, and some way to feel less alone in your experience and more acknowledged. And perhaps if you haven't gone through a loss that's this deep and profound as losing someone that you truly, deeply love, that it will give you some perspective on how to love more deeply, how to love more fully, and some gratitude for the people who are in your life. So I would love to hear your feedback and what you found useful, and what tips you're going to take from this in your life today, and how this has affected you. And thank you so much for your time and your listening. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you, and I am so glad that you gave yourself the time to listen in today. And I hope to see you on our next episode. It's Light Sprinkles. Thanks again for tuning in. I'm Spring Ulrich, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye for now.